people come to amusement parks for fear, but fear must remain safe. They voluntarily climb into metal cars, allow themselves to be lifted tens of meters above the ground, flipped upside down and accelerated to the speed of a highway car. Visitors may scream, close their eyes, and cling tensely to the handrail. But somewhere deep down, they are certain everything is under control. The ride was designed by engineers, tested by specialists, and every detail is calculated so that the ride ends where it began. It is this trust that compels people to lower their safety bar and, for a few minutes, surrender their lives to people they've never met.
A shopper's dream and a world of excitement. West Edmonton Mall.
In the mid-1980s, West Edmonton Mall in Alberta, Canada, was more than just a shopping mall. Its creators envisioned an entire city under one roof, a place where people could shop, dine, skate, watch shows, and spend time in a massive indoor amusement park. The scale of the complex was astonishing, even by Canadian standards. It housed hundreds of stores and numerous entertainment venues, and the main attraction of the indoor park, Fantasyland, later renamed Galaxyland, was the steel roller coaster, Mindbender. The Mindbender was intended to be a symbol of technical excellence. Designed by renowned German specialists, its construction cost was estimated at approximately $6 million. The roller coaster rose more than 44 meters. The train accelerated to almost 100 kilometers per hour, and the road included 3 vertical loops. All of this was housed not outdoors, but inside a massive building. The cars raced between metal supports, concrete columns, walkways, and the mall's walls. The proximity of the stationary structures made the speed even more intense. Passengers felt as if the train was barely managing to avoid the surrounding obstacles. At its opening, Mindbender was considered the largest indoor triple-loop roller coaster, and quickly became one of the complex's main icons. Despite its impressive size, the ride was still quite new. It had only opened to visitors a few months before the disaster. Thousands of people flocked to the mall, specifically for the ride, which looked extreme yet modern and reliable. People saw the massive metal rails, the complex wheel system, and the enormous structure capable of supporting the train's weight while traversing 3 loops. From the outside, the Mindbender gave the impression of a machine in which everything had been designed with a significant safety margin. On June 14, 1986, West Edmonton Mall was packed with visitors. Events were taking place, music was playing, people were shopping and lining up for the rides. The day before, the Mindbender had been inspected by the province's chief safety inspector. Following the inspection, the ride was deemed fit for use. For visitors, this meant there was no cause for concern. However, just 24 hours after the inspection, the last car of the train will derail. Among the people who decided to go for a ride that evening were 25-year-old Rod Chaco and his friend 24-year-old David Sager. David loved speed and thrills, so a ride on the world's largest indoor roller coaster seemed like a fitting distraction. The men took seats in the back car. Next to them were 24-year-old Tony Mandrusiak and his 21-year-old fiancée Cindy Sims. Tony and Cindy were getting married. They couldn't have known that the back car would soon prove to be the most dangerous part of the entire train. The operators checked the protective bars. The train left the station and began its climb. Then the train plunged downward, picking up speed. Passengers screamed as the cars entered the first loop. Everything unfolded as expected on an extreme roller coaster. Intense vibration, sudden G-forces, the roar of the wheels, and the sensation that the train was about to fly off the rails. That's why the first signs of a genuine malfunction were almost indistinguishable from the normal sensations of a ride. Each car was held to the rail by a system of wheels. Some rolled along the top of the guideway, while others gripped the sides and bottom of the rail, preventing the car from rising or falling when negotiating turns and loops. In the rear car of the Mindbender, one of the wheel assemblies was held in place by 4 special fastening screws. As the Commission would later determine, these screws were lost or destroyed. Without them, the bogie could no longer securely hold the car to the rail. This wasn't just a component that suddenly broke without warning. The investigation uncovered design and manufacturing flaws that allowed the fastening to weaken and suffer fatigue damage under repeated loading. During the ride, the lost car began to move erratically. It swayed from side to side and hit the track structure. Rod Jaco later recalled feeling a strong sway and managed to grab the handrail. Passengers likely didn't yet understand what was happening. On a roller coaster, people expect sudden movement, so the actual breakdown could have been perceived as just another element of the ride. But after a few moments, the wheel assembly finally gave up on the car. The rear car partially derailed and began to slide along the structure, colliding with it. The resulting friction slowed the entire train, but its momentum continued to propel it toward the third loop. During the derailment and violent movement, 4 passengers in the rear car were thrown out. Rod remembered only the swaying, the attempt to hold on, and the next moment when he was already falling onto the concrete floor of the shopping center. 3 other passengers, David, Tony, and Cindy, suffered fatal injuries. Rod was the only person from the lost car to survive. The impact shattered his legs, damaged his pelvis, back, shoulder, feet, and ribs. One of his lungs was punctured. Doctors discovered so many fractures in his legs that they initially considered amputation. Ultimately, his limbs were saved with metal plates, but Rod spent about 6 months in the hospital and later had to relearn how to stand and walk. Meanwhile, the rest of the train continued on its way. Due to the damaged rear car and the intense friction, the train lost speed. It began to climb the third loop, but no longer had enough momentum to complete it. The train stopped and then rolled backward. The damaged car struck a concrete column, after which the train finally came to a stop on the structure. Other passengers were trapped above. Some had to be evacuated, and many suffered minor injuries or were in a state of severe shock. Initial reports indicated approximately 15 injured, in addition to the fatalities. For eyewitnesses, the disaster seemed completely unreal. Following the accident, the Mindbender was immediately shut down, and Alberta authorities launched a public inquiry. The Commission was tasked with determining not only the immediate cause of the derailment, but also how a brand new ride, inspected by a government inspector just the day before the accident, could have proven so dangerous. Experts focused on the rear car and its wheel assemblies. It was determined that 4 fastening screws holding one of the assemblies in place had failed. When they loosened or broke, the wheel assembly separated and the car lost proper contact with the rail. Inspection of other components revealed fatigue cracks and problems in similar parts. The Commission concluded that design and manufacturing deficiencies contributed to the accident. The design allowed the propellers to gradually weaken, and the stresses generated during movement accelerated their failure. The maintenance and inspection system was also criticized for failing to promptly identify developing hazards. Following the investigation, the Mindbender train underwent significant modifications. The number of cars was reduced, each car was fitted with additional wheel assemblies, and improved head and shoulder support elements were installed. Devices capable of stopping the train from moving backwards were also added. Only after these modifications did the ride reopen. On July 14, 2019, it was a typical Sunday evening in the Indian city of Ahmedabad. The Kankaria Lake area was a popular family vacation spot. Following extensive improvements, the lake's surroundings now boasted walking areas, cafes, playgrounds, a small train, a zoo, and an amusement park. Families flocked here, met with friends, and spent the evening away from the city traffic. One of the most notable rides was Discovery, owned by Superstar Amusement. It featured a large pendulum with a long metal arm and a circular passenger platform. Rides sat along the edge of the circle, facing outward. During the launch, the platform rotating around its axis, while the arm simultaneously swung it upward. At the top, passengers momentarily lost almost all sense of their own weight, after which the structure plunked downward again. Unlike a roller coaster, the pendulum's motion is easily observed from the outside. Relatives and friends often stayed near the railings, filming the ride on their phones. That's why the Discovery disaster was captured on several videos. The footage shows not only the aftermath, but also the moment the massive metal structure gave way. There were 31 people on the platform that evening. Most of the passengers were young people between the ages of 16 and 26. They took their seats, the staff looked at their trains, and then the platform began to rotate. The boom swung ever faster, lifting the circle of people above the ground. Spectators stood around, waiting their turn or watching their friends. There was no indication that in a few seconds this routine ride would end in the deaths of 2 people. At approximately 5:40 p.m., the Discovery was in motion. The platform had risen to a height of approximately 6 meters when a sharp metallic crack was heard. The main supporting element of the pendulum had collapsed. Video footage shows the boom suddenly losing its proper position, striking the ride structure and the circular platform along with all the strapped-in passengers plummeting downward. The entire moment lasts only a few seconds. People don't have time to realize what's happening. They remain secured in their seats as the gondola collides with the metal supports and concrete foundation. Passengers on the side of the stairs and the hard platform that bore the brunt of the impact suffer particularly severe injuries. Immediately after the collapse, panic erupts around the ride. Some bystanders freeze for a moment, as if unable to believe what they've seen. Then people rush to the destroyed platform. Park staff, police, firefighters, and regular visitors attempt to free passengers trapped by belt and deformed structural elements. Debris lies on the ground, the cries of victims can be heard, and the broken arms of the pendulum towers over the platform. 2 people died, 24-year-old Manali Rajwati and 22-year-old Mohammed Javed. Another 29 passengers were injured, many seriously. The victims were taken to the city's LG hospital. Initial reports varied as the rescue operation continued, but authorities later confirmed 2 deaths and 29 injuries. For Manali's relatives, this day was supposed to be a normal family outing. She was visiting relatives in Ahmedabad and went to the park with her loved ones. After the accident, her family demanded to know who was responsible for the Discovery's technical condition and why the ride was even allowed to operate. Relatives of the victims also asked the same questions. Before the landing, no one had been able to independently assess the condition of the main supporting structure. Officials initially reported that a main shaft pipe had collapsed. Representatives from the municipality, police, and a forensic laboratory arrived at the scene to investigate. They needed to determine why this massive metal component, designed to support the weight of the platform, passengers, and constant cyclic loads, had suddenly collapsed while in motion. Particular attention was paid to the condition of the main support and supporting cables. According to police, preliminary expert findings indicated inadequate maintenance of the main support and associated components, the possibility of severe wear on the cables and accumulated metal damage was discussed. Such rides are subject to repeated loads. With each cycle, the multi-ton platform descends, reverses direction, and rises again. Even a small crack under such conditions can gradually grow until the remaining metal thickness is no longer sufficient to support the structure. The tragedy became even more outrageous after information about the inspections emerged. Just 8 days before the accident, on July 6th, a monthly technical fitness report had been issued for Discovery. Furthermore, the company had a certificate allowing the ride to operate throughout 2019. This meant that on paper, Discovery was considered safe less than 2 weeks before the collapse. Investigators had to determine who exactly conducted the audit, how thoroughly the pendulum was inspected, and whether the specific ride was truly listed correctly in all the documents. The day after the accident, police opened a case of causing death without intent to commit murder. Company executives, a manager, ride operators, and an assistant were arrested. In total, 6 people directly involved in the ownership and operation of Discovery were under investigation. The court initially denied them bail, citing the seriousness of the charges and the alleged flaws in the materials used. On May 11, 1984, thousands of people flocked to Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey. The weather was perfect for a full day at the park, riding roller coasters, strolling between attractions, and visiting the pavilions. One popular attraction was the Haunted Castle. Unlike fast-paced mechanical rides, here visitors navigated on foot. They had to navigate a dark maze filled with spooky props, flashing lights, mannequins, and costumed actors. From the outside, the haunted castle looked like a medieval castle, complete with towers, walls, and a gloomy entrance. But behind the decorative facade, there was no real permanent structure. The attraction consisted of 17 interconnected metal trailers. Inside, plywood partitions formed narrow, winding corridors. Visitors were deliberately disoriented. Strobe lights obscured their vision, sharp turns made it difficult to determine direction, and some doors and passages were simply props that led nowhere. The walls were lined in some areas with soft foam to protect visitors from impact in the dark. Inside, the ride contained wooden elements, fabric, plastic, fake spider webs, and other flammable props. This attraction was originally conceived as a temporary structure. However, it proved so popular that it continued operating for years. Its temporary status had a significant consequence. The haunted castle did not undergo the same full cycle of construction and fire inspections as a permanent structure. It lacked an automatic fire suppression system, smoke detectors, or a proper alarm system. It would later be discovered that the structure lacked a standard building permit, an occupancy certificate, and the local fire inspector had never conducted a full inspection of the interior. Authorities considered the castle a temporary structure despite it having been in the park for several years. The paradox was that the entire setup of the haunted castle was designed to create a sense of danger. Visitors entered into semi-darkness, heard screams, saw artificial smoke, and sudden flashes of light. Actors could suddenly appear from behind partitions. The frightening sets depicted monsters, skeletons, and scenes of violence. If something unusual were happening inside, people didn't necessarily immediately perceive it as a real threat. A scream could be part of the performance. Smoke could be a special effect. Even real flames could be mistaken for a prop for the first few seconds. Around 6:35 p.m., there were approximately 29 visitors inside the attraction. In one particularly dark area, a teenager used a lighter to see his way around. According to a witness, the lighting in the corridor was malfunctioning. The flames approached a damaged piece of foam hanging from the wall, which ignited. The teenagers attempted to extinguish the small fire, but it quickly spread across the flammable surface. Prosecutors subsequently concluded that the fire was started accidentally. The unidentified 14-year-old was not charged with a crime. One careless act should not have turned a small fire into a catastrophe, with 8 fatalities. The fire spread through the foam, plywood partitions, and stage sets. Ventilation units and air movements contributed to the fire's growth. The narrow metal trailers quickly began to fill with thick black smoke. The temperature inside rose rapidly. Rescuers later compared the structure to an oven. The metal walls held in the heat, while the burning synthetic materials released toxic combustion products. Some visitors saw real flames but initially thought they were part of the show. One of the girls later reported noticing a fire near the hunchback figure. Only when she smelled real smoke did she realize it wasn't a special effect. Her group screamed about a fire and tried to return to the entrance, bumping into walls in the darkness. Others pressed forward, confused about the exit and the direction the fire was coming from. The maze, which was supposed to create a joyful sense of disorientation, now hindered people's escape. Normally, visitors could slowly find their way through the scenery or signs. In the thick smoke, there was no time for this. Strobe lights, mirrors, false doors, and sharp turns made evacuation nearly impossible. People didn't know whether the next corridor led to the exit or turned them closer to the fire. A group of 9 teenagers proved particularly vulnerable. 5 were affiliated with Franklin K. Lane High School in New York City, while the rest were from New Jersey. Only one of the group managed to escape. A park employee carried the girl to safety. 8 of her friends remained inside the maze. 15-year-old Tina Genovese, 17-year-olds Joseph Buriti, Jose Carrion, Lenny Ruiz, and Samuel Valentin, as well as 18-year-olds Nicola Cajaza, Christopher Harrison, and Eric Rodriguez, were killed. All died from smoke inhalation and asphyxiation. Outside, park staff attempted to organize evacuation and fire suppression efforts. Flames quickly spread through the structure, and fire departments from several neighboring communities were dispatched to the scene. In total, departments from 11 nearby communities participated in the operation. By 7:45 p.m., the fire was under control. However, for some time no one realized that victims remained inside. This was due to the attraction's terrifying nature. The haunted castle was filled with human figures, mannequins, and frightening props. When firefighters began inspecting the charred interior, some of the bodies they found were initially mistaken for the remains of props. Only later did it become clear that 8 teenagers had been trapped. Parents and relatives were forced to wait hours for information, while rescuers dismantled the destroyed structure and attempted to identify the victims. In the fall of 1984, Great Adventure and its parent company Six Flags were charged with aggravated manslaughter. Prosecutors alleged that management demonstrated criminal indifference to customer safety by failing to install fire alarms and automatic suppression systems, despite existing recommendations. The prosecution argued that even if the initial fire was caused by a teenager with a lighter, it was the lack of protection that allowed the small blaze to escalate into a deadly conflagration. Haunted Castle was never rebuilt. Other attractions later took its place. and Six Flags Great Adventure continued operating. For new visitors, the fire gradually became a part of the park's history. Mindbender, Discovery, and Haunted Castle looked completely different. One attraction was a massive roller coaster inside a Canadian shopping mall. Another was a rotating pendulum near a popular Indian lake. A third had no moving cars at all and seemed like a relatively safe walking maze. But in each case, visitors relied on the same system of trust. They trusted that the design had been tested, the metal would withstand the load, and that in the event of a fire, they would be shown the way to the exit. They couldn't disassemble the wheeled assembly of Mindbender, examine the main shaft of Discovery, or check the fire suppression system inside Haunted Castle. Engineers, owners, inspectors, and government agencies were there to do that.